I was uninvited from Easter because I always make drama. 3 weeks later, their bills were dramatic. My name is Eleanor Harrison, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Sarasota, Florida, where retirees like me are supposed to enjoy our golden years in peace. But on Easter Sunday morning, I was sitting alone in my kitchen, holding my phone with the most devastating text message I'd ever received. Mom, we've decided Easter is immediate family only. You always create tension, and we need one peaceful holiday. I read those words from my daughter Linda 3 times, each reading hitting harder than the last. Immediate family only? I was her mother. I'd given birth to her, raised her through scraped knees and broken hearts, and buried my husband while supporting her entire family financially. How was I not immediate family? In my other hand, I held a bank receipt that had printed automatically that morning. The monthly transfer had gone through right on schedule, $4,200 deposited directly into Linda's account. The same money that would fund their peaceful Easter dinner that I was banned from attending. The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted to celebrate without me, but they had no problem celebrating with my money. What they didn't know was that their drama-free holiday was about to become very expensive. Because after 8 months of being a grieving widow who absorbed every slight and funded every demand just to feel connected to family, I was about to discover something that would change everything. You see, when Robert died of cancer 8 months ago, I thought supporting Linda's family financially was how I showed love. I thought paying for their house down payment, their children's private school, their monthly expenses, and every emergency that came up was what mothers do. I thought being generous meant being loved. I was wrong. By the time I was done, they learned exactly how much my drama was worth: $4,200 a month, plus a house they couldn't afford, plus an education they took for granted, plus a lifestyle that existed only because of my generosity. But let me start from the beginning. When I thought being the family ATM meant being family. Before we continue, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories like mine. Let me tell you who I really am, because my family seemed to have forgotten. My name is Eleanor Marie Harrison. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a cozy ranch house in Sarasota, Florida, where I moved with my late husband Robert 15 years ago when he retired from his engineering firm. For 35 years, I was a school principal here in Sarasota County, and I prided myself on being fair but firm with both students and parents. I never let anyone walk all over me professionally. Somehow, I forgot that lesson when it came to my own family. Robert and I were married for 45 beautiful years before cancer took him from me 8 months ago. We'd planned to travel Europe together, take those river cruises through Germany and Austria that we'd always dreamed about. Instead, I spent our retirement savings on his medical treatments and watching our daughter's families struggle financially during his 2-year battle with the disease. When Robert was first diagnosed, Linda and her husband Marcus were already stretched thin. They'd bought their dream house in Tampa just 3 years earlier with my help, and between the mortgage, their 2 teenage children's expenses, and Marcus's inconsistent income from his construction business, they were barely keeping their heads above water. That's when I stepped in. Like any loving mother would. I provided the $180,000 down payment for their house, which gave me 60% equity ownership according to our legal agreement. At the time, Linda cried with gratitude, saying I was saving their family's future. I felt proud to help my only child achieve her dreams. When Robert's medical bills started piling up, and Linda called crying about potentially losing the house, I started what I thought would be temporary monthly support. Over $4,000 every month, transferred automatically so they wouldn't have to ask and feel embarrassed. It was supposed to last just through Robert's treatment period. But then treatment stretched from months to years. The monthly transfers became routine, expected, never acknowledged with gratitude anymore. When Robert passed, I assumed the financial help would end, that Linda's family would get back on their feet. Instead, the requests increased. Mom, the kids need to stay in private school for stability during this transition, Linda explained after Robert's funeral. So I continued covering Westfield Academy's tuition for both Sophia and Ryan. $1,500 each semester per child. I wanted my grandchildren to have opportunities, to get the education that would open doors for them. On top of the monthly household support and school expenses, there were constant emergencies, car repairs that couldn't wait, dental work that insurance didn't cover, spring break trips that all the other kids were taking. Every request came with urgency and guilt, as if saying no would prove I didn't love them. After Robert died, these family dinners and gatherings became my lifeline. The house felt like a tomb, without his laughter echoing through the rooms. I lived for Sophia's basketball games at school, and Ryan's piano recitals. When Linda invited me for Sunday dinners, I felt like I had purpose again, like I belonged somewhere. What I didn't realize was that I was paying for the privilege of feeling included in my own family. The monthly transfers kept flowing automatically from my account to theirs. The school payments cleared without question. The emergency loans added up to thousands more throughout the year. I never said no because I thought that's what love looked like. I thought being needed financially meant being loved emotionally. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being Linda's mother and became her family's silent financial partner. Present when they needed money, invisible when they wanted space. They took my generosity for granted while treating my presence as an obligation, my grief as an inconvenience, and my need for family connection as drama. I should have seen the warning signs. The way Marcus would roll his eyes when I called, how Sophia stopped hugging me goodbye after family dinners, the whispered conversations that stopped when I walked into a room, the way Linda would sigh when I wanted to talk about Robert or share memories. But I was a grieving widow desperate to hold on to the only family I had left. So I absorbed every slight, funded every request, and convinced myself that their distance was just stress, their coldness just grief, their demands just temporary need. I was so focused on being the generous grandmother and mother that I forgot to ask a simple question. Was I being treated with the respect and love that my generosity deserved? The answer was sitting right there in that Easter text message. But it would take discovering their private conversations to truly understand how my family really felt about the woman who'd been bankrolling their entire lifestyle. The warning signs started small, like cracks in a foundation that you don't notice until the whole structure starts crumbling. It began with the little exclusions. Ryan made varsity basketball at Westfield Academy, the private school I'd been funding for 3 years. When I asked Linda about the playoff schedule, excited to watch my grandson play, she paused for just a moment too long. Oh, those games are really grandson play. She paused for just a moment too long. Oh, those games are really just for parents, Mom. You know how it is with school events. Just for parents. As if the grandmother paying his tuition wasn't family enough to attend. I swallowed the hurt and transferred an extra $300 for his new team gear without being asked. Marcus started making comments that cut deeper each time. During a family dinner I'd paid for, in the house I'd helped buy, he'd shake his head whenever I spoke about Robert or mentioned feeling lonely. Old people need so much attention, he'd mutter, just loud enough for me to hear. Maybe space is healthier for everyone. Space. That became their favorite word. When I called to check on the kids, Mom, we need space to handle our own problems. When I wanted to discuss the mounting expenses I was covering, can we have space from family business talk? When I expressed any emotion about Robert's absence, you need space to process your grief privately. But there was never space between them and my money. The financial requests escalated like a twisted auction where I was the only bidder. Last month, Linda called about Sophia's spring break trip. $2,800, Mom. All her friends are going to Cancun. She'll be devastated if she's the only one left behind. I transferred the money that same afternoon, depleting part of Robert's life insurance payout. Sophia never called to thank me. Linda sent a brief text. Got it. She's excited. But when they planned the pre-trip shopping day and dinner, I wasn't invited. It's really just a girls' day, Mom. You understand. I understood that I was good enough to fund their experiences but not good enough to share them. The pattern became painfully clear. Emergency dental work for Marcus when his tooth cracked. $800, no insurance coverage. I paid it immediately, but when he got the work done, he celebrated by taking Linda to an expensive steakhouse dinner. When I mentioned feeling left out, Linda sighed. Mom, you can't expect to be included in everything. We need couple time too. Couple time funded by my widow's account. The grandchildren started treating me differently. Sophia, who used to call me weekly, barely looked up from her phone during family visits. When I'd ask about school, the school I was paying for, she'd give one-word answers before returning to her device. Sophia, honey, tell Grandma about your history project, Linda would prompt. It's fine, Sophia would mumble, never making eye contact. Ryan became equally distant. The boy who used to beg me to play board games and listen to his piano practice now acted like I was furniture in the room. When I complimented his improved playing, he'd shrug and walk away. They're teenagers, Mom, Linda would explain. This is normal adolescent behavior. But their behavior toward their parents remained warm and chatty. It was only their grandmother, their financially supportive grandmother, who received the cold shoulder. Family dinners became exercises in tension management. I'd sit at the table I'd helped them afford, eating food purchased with money I'd provided, listening to conversations about plans I wasn't included in. The kids would discuss school events, sports practices, and friend drama as if I wasn't there. Linda and Marcus would talk about home improvements and vacation ideas while I sat silent, trying not to seem needy or dramatic. Drama became Linda's weapon of choice for shutting down any conversation she didn't want to have. If I asked about the family's budget or whether they needed to adjust their lifestyle, don't be dramatic, Mom. If I expressed hurt about being excluded from events, here comes the drama. If I wanted to discuss my grief or loneliness, must everything be dramatic with you? The word was deployed like a stop sign, halting any discussion that might require them to acknowledge my feelings or their dependence on my financial support. My emotional needs became drama, but their financial needs remained urgent family obligations. 2 weeks before Easter, the mask slipped completely. I'd asked if I could bring Robert's favorite coconut cake to Easter dinner, the same recipe I'd made for 45 years of family gatherings. Linda's response was swift and cruel. Must you always make everything about Dad, Mom? It's been 8 months. We're trying to create new traditions without constantly being reminded of death. Without being reminded of death, as if my husband's memory was a burden they'd rather not carry while cashing the checks from his life insurance policy. I kept quiet to keep the peace, absorbing every slight, every dismissal, every cruel comment because I thought that's what love looked like. I told myself that grief made people say things they didn't mean, that financial stress made families tense, that I needed to be more understanding. But deep down, I was beginning to realize a terrible truth. I wasn't being loved. I was being tolerated. And barely that. The automatic transfers kept flowing from my account to theirs every month. The school payments cleared without question. The emergency loans became routine. I was their most reliable financial resource, and their least appreciated family member. I was funding my own exclusion, bankrolling my own heartbreak, and paying for the privilege of being treated like an unwelcome burden by the very people who depended on my generosity to maintain their lifestyle. The Easter uninvitation was just the final, devastating confirmation of what had been building for months. They wanted my money, but they didn't want me. Saturday morning before Easter, I was in my kitchen making coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. I thought it might be about what time to arrive for dinner the next day, or maybe a request for me to pick up something from the store. I never imagined it would shatter what was left of my heart. Mom, we've decided Easter is immediate family only. You always create tension, and we need one peaceful holiday. I read those words 3 times, each reading hitting me like a physical blow. Immediate family only. I was her mother. I had given birth to her, stayed up all night when she was sick as a child, walked her down the aisle at her wedding, and held her hand through every crisis of her adult life. How was I not immediate family? Create tension? I was the one who absorbed every slight, swallowed every cruel comment, and bent over backward to avoid any conflict that might threaten my connection to the only family I had left. I called Linda immediately. The phone rang once before going straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. She was screening my calls on the day she'd just uninvited me from Easter. The cruelty of the timing hit me like a sledgehammer. That very morning, my automatic transfer had processed, over $4,000 flowing into their account to fund the peaceful Easter I was now banned from attending. They'd scheduled their immediate family-only announcement for after they'd secured their monthly payment. I spent that entire Saturday in a fog of disbelief. How had I become the family outsider? When had loving my family become creating tension? When had my presence become something they needed a holiday to escape from? That evening, desperate for some connection with my grandchildren, I remembered that Linda had left her iPad with me 2 weeks earlier while she took it to get repaired at the Apple store. She'd picked up my old one temporarily but forgotten to retrieve hers when the repair was finished. The iPad still had all her apps logged in, including FaceTime. Maybe I could at least see Sophia's face, hear Ryan's voice, even if I wasn't welcome at their Easter table. Maybe I could wish them a happy Easter Eve, even from a distance. When I opened FaceTime to call Sophia, a notification popped up on the screen. It was from their family group chat, the Beck family, and I could see my name in the preview message. My heart stopped. I should have closed it immediately, should have respected their privacy, but seeing my name in their private family conversation, especially after being uninvited from Easter, I couldn't help myself. I had to know what they were saying about me. What I found destroyed me completely. The conversation had started that afternoon, right after Linda sent me the uninvitation text. Linda had written, "Thank God she's not coming tomorrow. We can actually enjoy the day without walking on eggshells around her constant neediness." Marcus responded, "Your mom's gotten so dependent since your dad died. Good thing the money transfer went through this morning. At least we don't have to pretend everything's fine while we're broke." My hands were shaking as I read further. Sophia, my 15-year-old granddaughter whom I'd been funding through private school, had written, "Do we still get Easter money even though she's not coming? I wanted to save for those designer jeans I saw." Ryan, only 13, echoed his parents' cruelty. "Yeah. It's always so awkward when she talks about Grandpa and gets all sad. Like, we get it. He's dead." But Linda's response was the knife that cut deepest. "The $4,000 hits automatically Monday anyway, so we're covered. And she'll probably send guilt money to make up for missing the day. We should plan something fun with the extra cash." Marcus added, "Maybe this will teach her to back off permanently. We need space to be a real family without her hovering and crying all the time." I sat there in my empty kitchen, reading how my family celebrated my exclusion while counting on my automatic monthly transfer. They didn't just want me gone. They expected my money to keep flowing even after rejecting me completely. But the conversation continued. And it got worse. Sophia wrote, "Mom, can we use Grandma's Easter money for that beach house weekend you mentioned?" Linda replied, "Absolutely. She owes us after all the drama she's caused. Consider it payment for putting up with her depression." Ryan added, "Cool. And if she gets too sad about not being invited, we can just tell her we'll include her next time." Marcus's final message was the cruelest of all. "Honestly, holidays are so much better without old people making everything about their problems. Your mom needs to accept that her time being the center of attention is over." I felt like I was drowning. These weren't strangers talking about some burdensome obligation. This was my family, my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandchildren, celebrating my absence while planning to spend my money on a vacation to recover from the exhaustion of excluding me. They saw my grief as drama, my loneliness as neediness, my desire for family connection as hovering, my financial generosity as something I owed them for the burden of tolerating my existence. The worst part was their cold calculation. They knew my transfer would process automatically on Monday. They were already planning how to spend it while congratulating themselves on their cruelty. In their minds, they'd found the perfect solution. Take my money but eliminate my presence. I was their ATM, not their family member. A financial resource to be managed and manipulated, not a person to be loved and included. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying their words, trying to find some misunderstanding, some context that would make their cruelty less devastating. But there was none. Their contempt was clear, their entitlement complete, and their disregard for my humanity absolute. They wanted me to disappear while leaving my checkbook behind. Sunday morning arrived, and Easter came and went in my empty house. I sat alone at my kitchen table, looking at the coconut cake I'd made anyway. Robert's favorite recipe that Linda had dismissed as making everything about death. I thought about 45 years of Easter mornings with Robert, 43 years of celebrating with Linda, 15 years of spoiling my grandchildren. And now I was spending Easter alone because my presence was tension, but my money was treasure. That's when I realized something that changed everything. I didn't have to live this way. I didn't have to fund my own exclusion. I didn't have to bankroll my own heartbreak. They wanted space from me? I was about to give them space from my money too. Because if I wasn't family enough for Easter dinner, then my bank account wasn't family enough for their monthly budget. It was time they learned exactly how much their peaceful family life actually cost. I spent the next 3 days in a haze of hurt and confusion, replaying that group chat conversation over and over in my mind. Part of me wanted to call Linda and confront her, demand an explanation for their cruelty. Another part wanted to apologize, to beg for forgiveness for whatever I'd done to make them see me as such a burden. But the strongest part of me, the part that had been a school principal for 35 years and never let anyone disrespect her authority, was slowly waking up from months of grief-induced passivity. Monday came and went. True to their calculation, my automatic transfer processed exactly as they'd predicted, over $4,000 flowing from my account to theirs, while they celebrated excluding me from their lives. I stared at the bank notification on my phone, feeling sick at my own predictability. Tuesday morning, my neighbor Rose Martinez found me sitting on my back porch, still in my robe at 10 o'clock, staring blankly at my garden. "Eleanor, honey, you look terrible. What's wrong?" Rose was 71, a retired nurse who'd moved to Sarasota around the same time Robert and I had. She'd been bringing me casseroles and checking on me since Robert's funeral. One of the few people who seemed to understand that grief doesn't follow a convenient timeline. I told her everything. The Easter uninvitation, the group chat, their cold calculation about my money, their celebration of my absence. Rose listened with growing anger, her face getting redder with each detail. "Eleanor Harrison, that is not family behavior. That's financial abuse disguised as love," she said firmly. "They're treating you like a bank, not a mother." "But they're all I have left," I whispered, the words sounding pathetic even to my own ears. "Honey, people who wish you weren't around while cashing your checks aren't family, they're parasites." Rose took my hands in hers. "Think about this clearly. They uninvited you from Easter, but kept your money scheduled to arrive Monday. What does that tell you about how they really see you?" Her words hit like a lightning bolt. They saw me as a financial resource to be managed, not a person to be loved. The money was essential. My presence was optional. Wednesday morning, I did something I should have done months earlier. I called James Chen, the attorney who'd handled Robert's estate and helped us with the legal paperwork when I provided Linda's house down payment. "James, I need to understand my legal position with Linda's financial situation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, Eleanor. Let me pull your files." I could hear papers rustling. "Ah yes. The equity agreement. You provided $180,000 for the down payment, which gave you 60% ownership stake in the property. The monthly support you've been providing is entirely voluntary. There's no legal obligation." Voluntary. That word echoed in my mind. I'd been choosing to support them, not obligated to do so. "James, I need you to be very clear with me. If I stopped the monthly transfers, what would happen legally?" "Nothing," he said immediately. "Those transfers are gifts, Eleanor. You can stop them any time without any legal consequences. As for the house, since you hold majority equity and they've defaulted on payments before, you have significant rights including the ability to force a sale if necessary." Force a sale. The house they lived in, the house they took for granted, was mostly mine. "But James, they're my family. Doesn't that create some obligation?" There was a long pause. "Eleanor, I've been practicing family law for 28 years. Family obligation flows both ways. It includes respect, inclusion, and gratitude, not just financial support flowing in one direction. That afternoon, James connected me with my bank manager, Susan Walsh, who'd helped me set up the automatic transfers during Robert's illness. Susan pulled up my account history on her computer screen. "Mrs. Harrison, let me show you something," she said, turning the monitor toward me. "These monthly transfers represent approximately 70% of their household income based on what I can see. Without these funds, their budget would collapse completely." 70%. I was funding almost their entire lifestyle while they treated me like an unwelcome guest in their lives. "Susan, I need to understand. What would happen if I stopped these transfers?" "Their account would immediately show a deficit. Based on their spending patterns, they'd be unable to meet their basic obligations within 2 weeks. The private school payments would bounce, their credit cards would hit limits, and their mortgage payment would likely fail." "And legally, I can just stop?" "Absolutely. These are voluntary transfers from your account. You have complete control." That evening, I sat in Robert's favorite chair, looking at our wedding photo on the side table. What would he think about how his life insurance money was being used? Would he want me funding people who celebrated my absence and called my grief drama? I thought about all the dreams we'd had for retirement: the European river cruise through the Rhine Valley, the trip to Ireland to trace his family genealogy, the renovations we'd planned for our own home. All of that money had gone to support a family who saw my generosity as obligation and my presence as burden. Thursday morning brought clarity like sunrise after a long, dark night. I called James back. "I want to stop all financial support," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "They told me I create tension, and they need space from me. I'm going to give them space from my money too." "Are you sure, Eleanor? This is a significant decision." "James, for months I've been funding my own exclusion, bankrolling my own heartbreak. They want to be immediate family only? Then they can fund their immediate family budget without outside help." "I understand. What specific actions do you want to take?" "Stop the monthly transfers immediately. Remove myself as guarantor on their car loans and credit cards. And I want to understand my options regarding the house if they can't meet their obligations." "I can have all of that started today. The transfer cancellation takes effect immediately. But the guarantee removals require 30 days notice by law. For the house, we'll monitor their mortgage payments and act accordingly if they default." That afternoon, I drove to the bank and filled out the paperwork to cancel all future automatic transfers. Walking out of First National Bank of Sarasota, I felt lighter than I had since Robert's funeral. Every dollar going forward would be mine to spend on my own life, my own dreams, my own peace. Friday evening, I made a decision that felt like honoring Robert's memory properly. I called the travel agency and booked the Rhine River cruise we'd always dreamed of taking together. 2 weeks in Germany and Austria, visiting castles and vineyards, eating authentic food and meeting new people who might actually appreciate my company. The trip cost $6,000, less than 2 months of Linda's support payments. But this money would create memories instead of funding ingratitude. As I hung up the phone, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. For months, I'd been the grieving widow who absorbed disrespect to maintain family connections. But that woman was disappearing, replaced by someone who remembered her own worth. They wanted immediate family only? They were about to discover that immediate family needed to fund itself. Because if I wasn't welcome at their Easter table, my money wasn't welcome in their monthly budget either. The first week passed in blissful silence. My phone didn't ring with emergency requests. No text messages about urgent expenses or unexpected bills. For the first time in months, I woke up each morning knowing that my money was staying in my own account, available for my own needs and dreams. I spent that week rediscovering what it felt like to make financial decisions based on my own desires rather than someone else's demands. I bought groceries without calculating how much I'd already spent on Linda's family. I paid my own bills without worrying about their budget shortfalls. I even splurged on fresh flowers for my kitchen table. Something I'd stopped doing because it seemed frivolous when others needed my money for essentials. But I knew the calm wouldn't last. Their budget was built on my foundation, and foundations don't disappear without consequences. The reality hit them the second week of May. It was a Tuesday morning when my phone finally rang with Linda's name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. Then again, finally, I answered on the fourth ring. Mom. Thank God. Linda's voice was tight with panic. Something's wrong with our bank accounts. The school called about overdue tuition payments, and my credit cards started declining yesterday. There must be some kind of mistake. I kept my voice calm and level. There's no mistake, Linda. What do you mean? Of course there's a mistake. Westfield Academy says we owe $3,000 for both kids' semester payments. But those are automatically covered. Not anymore, I said simply. There was a long pause. What do you mean, not anymore? I mean, I've stopped paying for the school where my grandchildren call me needy and awkward. I've stopped funding the lifestyle of people who celebrate my absence. Mom, I don't understand what you're talking about. Your iPad, Linda. The family group chat that was still open when I tried to FaceTime Sophia after you uninvited me from Easter. The silence on the other end was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. Mom, you don't understand. We were just venting. Families vent sometimes. Families vent. But what I read wasn't venting about normal frustrations. You called my grief drama, my loneliness neediness, and my desire for family connection hovering. You celebrated excluding me, while counting on my money to pay for your celebration. But Mom, we need that support, you can't just stop. I can. And I have. You said you needed immediate family only for Easter. Well, immediate family can fund itself without outside help. Linda's panic escalated. Mom, please. We can talk about this. Maybe we overreacted about Easter. You can come to dinner this Sunday. Linda. You didn't overreact about Easter. You revealed your true feelings about me. And now I'm acting on that information. She hung up without another word. 20 minutes later, Marcus called. His tone was aggressive from the first word. Eleanor, what the hell is this about our accounts? Linda's crying. The school is demanding money, and our credit cards aren't working. It's about respect, Marcus. Something you might want to research. Don't get smart with me. You can't just abandon your family because your feelings got hurt. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply no longer funding people who wish I would disappear. You wanted space from my hovering and crying? Congratulations. You also get space from my checkbook. You're being ridiculous. Families support each other. You're absolutely right. Families do support each other. Emotionally, socially. And yes, sometimes financially. But support flows both ways, Marcus. It includes respect, inclusion, and basic human decency. What you've been doing is taking my money while treating me like garbage. Look, maybe we could have been more considerate, but that doesn't mean you should punish the kids. The kids? You mean Sophia, who asked if she'd still get Easter money even though I wasn't invited? Or Ryan, who said it's awkward when I mention his grandfather? Those kids? Marcus was quiet for a moment. You read our private messages. I accidentally saw them on Linda's iPad. And I learned exactly how my family really feels about the woman who's been bankrolling their entire lifestyle. This is insane. You can't just cut us off. Watch me. He hung up even more angrily than Linda had. The third week brought escalating panic. Their credit cards, which had been backed by my excellent credit score and financial guarantee, were suddenly limited to what their actual income could support. Linda's shopping trip to Target resulted in a declined card at the checkout line. Marcus couldn't fill up his truck at the gas station because their credit limit had been slashed. Susan at the bank called to inform me that she'd processed the 30-day notice to remove my guarantees from all their loans and credit accounts. It's all done, Mrs. Harrison. As of next month, their credit standing will be based solely on their own income and payment history. That same week, I received a certified letter from Westfield Academy addressed to me personally. The private school had researched their records and discovered that I'd been the source of tuition payments for 3 years. They were politely requesting that I contact them regarding the outstanding balance for Sophia and Ryan's current semester. I called the school's business office directly. Mrs. Harrison, thank you for calling. We have a balance of $3,000 for your grandchildren's accounts. We've tried contacting Mr. and Mrs. Beck, but they've assured us that you would handle the payment as usual. I'm sorry, but that's no longer the case. I am not responsible for their children's education expenses. If they can't pay, you'll need to work out a payment plan with them directly. I see. Well, unfortunately, if the balance isn't resolved within 2 weeks, the children will need to transfer to public school to finish their semester. I understand. That's between you and their parents. 4 weeks after Easter, Linda showed up at my front door unannounced. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed, wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 2 days earlier at the grocery store where her card had been declined in front of me. Mom, please. We need to talk. I let her in, but I didn't offer coffee or ask her to sit down. The kids have to leave Westfield. We can't make the mortgage payment this month. Marcus is working double shifts, but it's not enough. She started crying. I got a job at the mall, but retail wages don't cover what we've gotten used to. What you've gotten used to was my generosity, Linda. And generosity requires gratitude, which requires respect. I know we said some terrible things, but we didn't mean them. We were just stressed. You meant them, and more importantly, you felt comfortable saying them because you thought I'd never find out. You thought I was trapped by my grief and loneliness into accepting any treatment as long as you let me see the grandchildren occasionally. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time you called me just to check how I was doing? When's the last time you invited me somewhere without needing money first? When's the last time you included me in family plans instead of excluding me and then asking for funding? She couldn't answer. Linda, I've spent the last month discovering what it feels like to be respected instead of tolerated. I've joined a book club at the library. I've started volunteering with the literacy program, helping immigrant families learn to read English. These people appreciate my time and knowledge. They don't see me as a burden or drama. But we're your family. Family is how people treat you, not just biology. The volunteers at the library treat me better than my own family has. Mom, we'll lose the house. That's a possibility. I own 60% of it through my down payment, and I have legal rights if you can't meet your obligations. James is monitoring the situation. Her face went white. You'd take our house? I'd exercise my legal ownership rights in a property I largely paid for. There's a difference. Where would we live? Somewhere you can afford on your actual income. Like most families do. Linda left that day without getting what she came for, but she did leave with something valuable. The truth about consequences. 2 months after Easter, James called with news. Eleanor, they've missed 2 mortgage payments. As majority equity holder, you have the right to demand immediate sale of the property to recover your investment. What would that mean for them? They'd be forced to sell. After paying off the remaining mortgage, they'd split the proceeds according to equity percentages. They'd get about 40% of whatever's left, which might be enough for a down payment on something much smaller. And me? You'd recover your full $180,000 investment, plus your share of any appreciation, probably close to $220,000 total. That afternoon, Linda called one final time. Mom, please don't take our house. We'll do anything. Linda, I'm not taking your house. I'm exercising my ownership rights in property I largely paid for when you can't meet your obligations. This is what happens when people bite the hand that feeds them. We're sorry. We'll apologize publicly. We'll include you in everything. Linda, I don't want forced apologies or obligatory invitations. I want authentic relationships based on mutual respect. And I no longer believe that's possible with people who saw my generosity as weakness and my grief as drama. 3 months after Easter, they sold the house. Marcus had to take a second job driving for a food delivery service. Linda worked full-time at a department store for the first time in 8 years. The kids transferred to public school and had to get part-time jobs to afford the clothes and activities they'd taken for granted. But here's what surprised me. The universe abhors a vacuum, and when I stopped pouring my energy into people who didn't appreciate it, space opened up for people who did. My book club friends invited me to join their monthly dinner gatherings. The literacy program coordinator asked me to lead a workshop on teaching reading comprehension. My neighbor Rose and I started taking day trips to art museums and historic sites around Florida. I took that Rhine River cruise in October. 2 weeks of incredible food, fascinating history, and new friendships with fellow travelers who were delighted by my company, rather than burdened by it. I scattered some of Robert's ashes at a beautiful castle overlooking the Rhine, and for the first time since his death, I felt peace instead of just grief. The travel group from the cruise invited me to join their next adventure, a cultural tour of Ireland, the following spring. I said yes immediately, using money that would have otherwise funded people who saw me as a burden. 6 months after Easter, I updated my will. Instead of leaving everything to Linda's family, I established scholarships for underprivileged children to attend private schools and funded literacy programs that would help families like the ones I'd been working with. My money would go to people who valued education and opportunity, not people who took both for granted. The final surprise came 8 months later. Linda sent me a card on my birthday. Not asking for money, not making excuses, just acknowledging the day. Inside, she'd written a brief note. "Mom, I got promoted to assistant manager at the store. Working has been hard, but I'm proud of what I'm accomplishing on my own. Thank you for forcing me to become independent." It wasn't an apology, and it didn't repair our relationship, but it was recognition that consequences can sometimes lead to growth. As for me, I learned that I had spent so many years being needed that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. The literacy families wanted my help. The book club wanted my insights. The travel group wanted my friendship. These people chose my company because they enjoyed it, not because they needed my money. I'm 71 now, and I've never felt more powerful or more peaceful. My money is mine to spend on dreams rather than obligations. My time is mine to invest in people who value it. My energy goes toward relationships that feed my soul instead of draining my spirit. They wanted Easter without me, so they could have peace. I gave them a lifetime without my financial support so I could have mine. And you know what? We both got exactly what we wanted. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever realized that your generosity was being mistaken for obligation by family members who showed no gratitude? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine.